we have a good bit on the agenda, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. Call to order at 2:01, and if we could start with a roll call, please.
Mr.
12:01.
12:01, what'd I say, 2?
You did say two.
Wishful thinking.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Dot?
Here.
Mr. Becker?
Here.
Ms. Goodman? Mr. Adam Dot? Ms. Kaminsky? Here.
All right, do we have an approval for the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. We have public comment now. I don't know if that involves... You have nothing? Okay. All right, the minutes were sent out, a while back. I had a chance to go over those. Any corrections to the minutes? If not, if I could get an approval.
I'd make a motion to approve them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, Susan.
Okay, so hopefully you looked at the accounts payables for August 24th, August of 2024. Just need you to approve those. The only thing on there is that we have some more of the PFAS expenses, so that is reimbursable, so we just need you to approve for Fund 295, the expenses for August of 2024.
Okay. Do we have a motion for that, or any discussion beforehand?
Is the lighting repair, the lights out in the, what is that?
The LEDs?
Galaxy Electric, what is that?
It's a variety. He's got caught up in building us. So it's a variety of things that he's done
Okay, got it.
around the airport over probably the last year.
Okay.
Have a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve it.
Support.
All right, now do a roll call vote.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Dot?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Adam Dot?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes. And then there was one invoice that I need to approve for Fund 481, which is for install the doors, which, sure you guys had already approved that, and that was for the $9,628.57.
It's not technically installing doors, it's the installing new door hardware, so new motors, or door openers is what I'm looking for there, on the existing truck barn.
Questions? I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Dot?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Adam Dot?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes. And then there was just a review of where you're at with, the 3 different projects you were working on, of what's been spent and the remainder of that. And then there is the revenue and expenditures for August compared to August last year, and then your year-to-date total, and then a comparison of last year to this year. Just a couple of things that I want to point out. That negative cash, the $11,622.06 at the very bottom of the year-to-date for this year. If you look at the state reimbursement PFAS of the $26,342, and then you look at the expense line item, those should tie, which are $41,807. Pretty much your negative cash balance is just waiting for that PFAS reimbursement to come back, which is about $15,000. So, you're running pretty true to form for your year-to-date totals. And then the other thing to remember is when you're kind of looking, since it's year-end, at some of those numbers, even though this is for August, your revenue August aren't in the August, because we received those kind of later in the year, or maybe in September, so it's what was booked as of August 31st. And so then most of your expenses down below pretty much are your expenses that have come through August. There's probably a little bit of gap in some of those revenues, so next month we'll take a truer picture of where you guys are kind of at. Because then I'll kind of know what's come in after September 30th or October, and kind of go over some of those a little bit better. But did anybody have any questions on some of that?
Are there any budget adjustments you're intent, or
I won't
anticipating?
know that till we're all done, like where we are revenues and expenditure wise, but I'll give the list again of like I did for you guys to approve those, to move some of those line items to be more informed, so that way we'll be ready for that audit.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
So it would be to approve the, I don't know how it's listed on your agenda there.
Revenue and expense,
Yep.
trial balance.
Yep.
So moved.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky? Yes. Mr. Jeff Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Adam Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky? Yes.
All right, as for the committees, the only committee that met, and it's been pretty active over the last month, is the transition committee, and that'll be a standing committee on these agendas now for the next year. And we finally tracked down kind of how this works with the billing with Mead and Hunt for doing this. There's a project that I'm going to propose at a future meeting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we're going to have, by that time, Stephanie can get all that stuff to us easily by a special meeting that we should be having in the next, well, pretty soon. And we can look over that and see if we want to proceed ahead with that. I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking about that right now. I realize that I'm throwing a lot of questions out, but that has been very active over the last month. Barry and I spent 3 hours together going over what happens here. We've met together, twice, I think, since the last meeting. And so there's a lot going on with that. And Barry, if you want to add anything, that would be fine. But I'm not sure there's really much to talk about until we get that document from Mead and Hunt.
So to summarize, the committee is pursuing an engagement with our consultant, Mead and Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And we're waiting on that proposal, and then that will be brought to the board at most likely a meeting later this month.
Yeah.
And there's other reasons we need to have a meeting later this month as well.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So that really, if you want to add anything to that, I'm not sure today is the day to really do a deep dive into that. Okay.
Mike, I agree, it's not the day to do a deep dive, but I would just share with the board that the proposal, is to study 3 models to run the airport. One is pretty much a status quo where you have an airport manager and a FBO. A second is looking at where you contract out to a third party, kind of as Muskegon Airport is. They have, I think, pretty intensive third-party contract to kind of privatize the whole airport, and the third is a Elston model. And so Mead and Hunt is going to outline the roles and responsibilities and all the 3 models. Cost, I think, not to exceed $20,000.
Not to exceed $20,000, but
so
again, we don't have that document. We should have a pretty closer estimate of what it would actually cost to do that. All right, old business. Oh, I'm sorry.
Another thing.
I'm sorry.
I do need you guys, to approve a budget before September 30th of 2024.
So that would be a good point. Is that budgeted? Is that a budgeted expense in our draft budget as, presented right now, Barry and Mike?
That wouldn't be, no, because that's just come up in the last week or so.
So how do we pay for that?
We've got, you sent something, man, I was just looking, I can't come up with it, where all the funds that were allocated, we had about $80,000 left. Can we utilize those funds for that process?
The ARPA funds?
Well, so to speak, operational.
I mean, that, I defer to others in the room who know the rules around the use of those funds more than I do.
You can ask for permission, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
Those were, there's nothing tagged to them.
No.
Well, there was 3 programs that we
Right.
okayed,
Mhm.
and they came in under cost, or projected
Right.
cost. And we have about 80,000 in total sitting there. And because of this that's ongoing, it'd be a great time to utilize those dollars.
We as in the county board, or we as in the airport board?
Well, the airport board asked, and then the county board granted. Yes, Lisa?
So I would say that a proposal or something should be sent to the board for the board to approve the change in use of funds. If there is a contract, then,
It doesn't have to be anything
no,
big
No.
depth,
no,
nothing
no,
like that.
no, that we
Yep.
have money left over from
Mm,
whatever
right.
we allocated to.
Right.
We now want to use the funds for X, and
Yeah.
then it just goes in front of the board for a vote.
Yep.
Mhm.
So then, I'm gonna suggest, since we're talking a special meeting, that be a 3rd item on that agenda.
Yeah.
Once we know what that agreement with Mead Hunt is, and we know what the dollar amount is, that can be incorporated into the budget. We don't have to do it as budget adjustment, and we can do all of that at that special meeting.
Probably not, it's not secret.
Now, the budget, so we need to go over that budget then as well, at this special meeting. We need to get that done by the 30th.
I mean, the draft budget was approved, the
Mhm.
only change will be the county allocation, and then now this
Right,
other change, but
right.
we've already discussed how the board wants to handle it, so it would just be a transfer in from grant dollars and the expense out.
Right. I'm just saying that we just need to have that document ready for a vote at this next meeting.
Correct.
Coming up whenever we get that done. Yeah, that's fine.
But the number that's missing at this point would be the Mead and Hunt.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Mead and Hunt, you don't need to include that in your budget if you're going to ask to reallocate those numbers, because you already have those
Right.
dollar amounts, and that's in Fund 481.
Right.
It's not in the airport fund,
Yeah.
which is, I need your budget for the airport
Exactly.
fund.
Okay, so that.
Exactly.
There isn't in
No.
the airport fund it shows it in from that fund.
Right,
and
that
out.
money's already there in
Separate.
Fund 481.
We're
Yep.
just tagging something new to that.
Right, just asking permission from the county board
That's all I
to
have.
reallocate those monies to use for Mead and Hunt. So that's not a budget item that we need to.
Okay, so that'll be a pretty quick thing then.
You know, why wouldn't, expenses that we incur as an airport authority show up on our budget, even if they come out of a county fund?
So it's Fund 481, which is your capital improvement fund.
Okay?
So we just had another invoice that you approved to come out of that fund, 481. So they're two separate funds. When they do show up, they just show up separately. So like, most of your expenses are this, that are in that 481. These are your remaining balance, those 3 projects that the money got funded for. So that $20,000 that they want to spend for Mead Hunt probably gonna come out of it. Asking to reallocate that to the 481. all your expenses that come through the airport do get paid, and they're paid through Fund 295, it's the airport fund. So like, when you approve that budget and the county gives $150,000, that's a transfer into the Fund 295, and that money's there, and so any money that's spent out of the airport fund is booked into the Fund 295.
Okay, but should we line item that and show it on ours as we expect to spend 20,000 out of 481?
No, it's gonna be in Fund 481. The money's no longer in Fund 295. Money is specifically in 481,
So it's its own line item.
right?
So maybe what you're asking is,
On whose budget?
In
The
the
authority.
airport, 481.
I think what you're saying is, should there be a budget for Fund 481 so that you see a
Mead and Hunt, $20,000.
a, here's what we
Whatever.
anticipate to spend this year out of that fund, and here are the expenses out of that fund for this year, as opposed to what we have right now is just kind of the balance of that fund, and as expenses come through, they get expensed out.
Well, I think you have projects in that.
We do,
budget,
yeah.
Mhm.
There's line items there.
so it's not just one.
So should we add, I guess my question is, should we add Mead and Hunt, just like the other
Probably.
projects are shown there?
That's what we're gonna ask.
Once the board approves.
Yeah, we have
it,
to send,
then you could,
Right, but this board will vote before the end of the year. And so what I'm saying is, should we write Mead and Hunt in our budget for 481? And then it's the county's prerogative whether they're gonna give us the 20 or not, but our budget would show that that's where we're expecting it to come from.
The money's already
The
there.
money's already.
yeah.
yeah, we're not.
Our-
Mead and Hunt doesn't care where the money's coming from.
Uh-uh.
I understand what you're saying, Adam. The county's not,
Better
the county
define.
already gave you the money
Okay.
for the 3 projects that you have in that fund. You're just taking what, leftover money from that fund and saying, okay, instead of doing the airport hangar, now we're gonna give it to Mead and Hunt. You can put Mead and Hunt in there as another project, so you can keep track of it.
So, on our budget, so we do the special meeting, we're gonna have to go into closed or a public, comment period for that budget here? I just don't recall. Do we generally do that here or
You're
no?
that last. I think we
We've
did.
never done
Yeah.
a
Okay,
public
I'm just
hearing
asking.
for.
I don't recall it, that's, but,
I don't know if we're supposed to or not, but that's not
yeah,
something.
it's not been historical.
Correct.
Okay. All right, anything else? All right, old business, I think pretty much just the budget. New business, anything?
Well, actually, I mean, where would you like to talk about Central Air Service?
Well, I'm about to turn the whole thing over to you at some point, so.
Well, I didn't
You have all the
incorporate it in-
information.
I did incorporate it into my report.
Yeah.
But I was, we should, think it's probably appropriate under old business.
That's fine, I'm just cleaning up all of the
A
things
lot
that I,
developed since
Yeah.
this agenda was put together.
what I can talk about, I think I'm pretty much done with.
Okay, so then, well, let's start with Essential Air Service. So as the board is aware, on Friday, DOT granted our request to enter alternate Essential Air Service with Contour as our contract carrier for a 3-year period, starting in now 15 days. What normally takes 2 to 3 months is gonna get somehow done in 2 weeks. So far, things seem to be going well. So over the weekend, Contour ticket sales went online. So you can purchase tickets post-October 1st on Contour. That happened Saturday morning. Late Saturday and into Sunday, the fares for connecting through the American Interline started rolling out into American system. So as of midday yesterday, you can now book American connecting flights with Contour post-October 1st. And the Cape Air flights during that same time period were turned off. There were periods of time where you had both, and it's interesting watching the data over the weekend. The changes on the airport's website, the coding changes necessary to direct you to the right place, depending on date, I implemented on Saturday, so you can go to our website and it will do the right thing pre-September 30th and post-September 30th. I did some minor website cosmetic updates, so Contour is mentioned starting service 10/1. Our marketing firm will be doing a complete website cleanup, so we have pictures of the right aircraft and all of the details get done, and talk a little bit more about that. Probably that's next under new business. And so this morning, well, let's talk about things that need to happen before service can start. So the first is a grant agreement between the airport authority and the federal government needs to be executed so that they will pay for things starting October 1st. I reached out on Friday to DOT. They responded this morning that they are working on that grant agreement and that it is going through legal right now. They need a few pieces of information from me, which I will get to them after this meeting. So the board will need to approve that grant agreement, and the total price on that is approximately $21 million. So big ticket item of funds that will be flowing through this airport. Minor point, but because we will be receiving more than $1 million a year in federal funding, we will be subject to different kind of audit. Single audit, so that adds some expense to our audit, but down the road. So that's one document that needs to be approved. Then on Friday, after we got the word, I reached out to our attorney, George Saylor, and just gave him a heads up that we're going to need time of his timely basis over the next couple of weeks to go through this. This morning, I sent him our previous contract for Essential Air Service, as well as another document, which I'll mention in a second. He got back to me right away, so he is now at least aware and engaged. That gets into the other half of this. So we get money from DOT, and that's what that grant agreement is about. Then we spend it to Contour, and we need agreements in place that basically govern that relationship between the airport authority and Contour Airlines. Historically, when we previously were an Essential Air Service, we combined into one agreement our standard airline lease, basically sets rates for leasing space and basic airport fees, and then the separate AES piece of air service, lump those into one agreement. Question I had to George is, should we break those apart and have them as separate documents, because it gets kind of messy, lease terminology with air service terminology in one document. Then a second question is, Contour this morning, even though I've asked for it for weeks, finally got me a draft of their version of their airport contract for AES. My question to George is, do you want to start from theirs? Do you want to start from ours? How do we want to do this? His preference is to start from ours because he originally wrote that, so he's most familiar with that. I'm sure Contour would have a different opinion, and we need to work through that. So there may be In addition to the grant, there may be one or two separate agreements with Contour, that need to be in place by October 1st. So that set of 2 or 3 documents will need to be approved at a special meeting once that all comes together. So those are kind of board steps that need to happen between now and the end of the month.
So in your budget for next fiscal year, you're gonna have to
Oh,
add
yeah,
those.
that's good. An $8 million or $6 million line item in there that should be added.
So it'll be for the full grant amount, and then you're gonna have to put an expense line that's going back out to Contour. And
So
then
is it the full grant amount for
So,
the year or
the
for the
full-
entire contract?
for the year, for
Okay.
October 1st through September 30th,
Okay.
you'll have to figure out what that amount is.
Yep,
Is it basically 100% in and out?
yes.
Okay, so then those line items should tie. And then the way we did it last time is we had a separate bank account for that. And so the money would go in there. Once we got that money, then we release it as an ACH back out to what would be Contour now.
Yes, yep.
You want that set up again, because we'll have to open up that account because we closed that, because we don't have, account for that.
I have not had the conversation with Contour as to how they,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
DOT just needs the account number, so I don't think it has to be separate. It probably works best.
it works
because
best on our
it
end
is.
to keep that separate
So-
from the airport, yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be in its own account, because then, once that money comes, then we go in and we'll do a ACH transfer out of there. Because otherwise, like, we can't say every 15th of the month, we're gonna transfer that amount, because we might not get that to the 18th. So once it's there, then we manually go in and we'll push that money through, is how it worked the last time.
So is that account?
It's closed, so we'll have to open an account.
That's probably one of the things they're gonna need as
Right.
part of the grant agreement.
So I'll talk to Rachel today about
Okay,
getting that set back up, and we had it at PNC, so PNC's pretty good about that, so.
okay.
If it's 100% push through, there's no administrative fees that they incorporate in this or anything?
Nope.
No?
You know what, so Barry, in year one, do I understand that we're getting a lump sum for the federal government for 6.8 million or?
Their process 4 years ago, I don't know if it's changed, but it was basically, we get a chunk of that each month based on how many flights are operated. So Contour doesn't get paid
Until they provide the service.
if they don't. So if they cancel 10 flights, they will get less than the allotted amount. It's basically per flight.
The reason why I asked is, in the event we have an influx of cash, I see banks paying 4% and 5% interest.
So we
Don't have.
This basically, as soon as it comes in, we turn
We
around.
have like, I can't remember, it's within 24 or 48 hours that has to be
A
paid.
sweep. Okay,
Yeah,
fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Are there any changes that we need to make to the budget? You know, you mentioned we were gonna be held to a higher audit standard, that would have a higher expense. I don't know what I don't know, but are there any other budget changes?
I defer that to Susan. I'm not aware of anything that we do differently. It's just when the auditors audit, they've got extra reporting.
It's just an extra audit, so they'll audit just that federal money. So basically, they'll want like all the bank statements, any bills, any money, to make sure that that money was really spent where it was supposed to go.
I assume they charge more for it.
Oh, of
because
course they do.
So I think my point is, do we need to budget for that increased charge?
Yeah.
Or we could be a few $1,000s short.
Right,
Ours
Maybe.
is 7, right?
yeah, but theirs won't,
7,000.
yeah. I can reach out to them, but I'd be surprised if it was more than $1,500, because it's just the one grant that they're going to audit, which is the AES.
Estimated.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to auditors today.
As we go through this, there are gonna be some things that we're not gonna realize until after. I mean, this is good because we're catching things that I haven't even thought about in 4 years, so we're just starting this process, so. So back to the agreements, so those are the agreements. I'm obviously intending on working with the parties to bring those to the board. Is there a process that the board would prefer I go through so that the board is more engaged in this process? Want a committee that works with me, et cetera, or do you just want me to bring final documents to you at a special meeting later this month?
Oh, would that be an advantage to have some of us involved in that?
It's your preference to how
We're
you
cooks in the
want
kitchen, Mike.
Would it be in the executive committee to hammer through this?
That would make sense.
That would
for
make
something of
sense,
this
yeah, that way we don't have to
type.
create another entity.
Right.
When would you want to meet with this group, or is
Until I
there
have
any way?
anything to present, I can't even.
Because we're talking about 14 days of
Correct.
intense activity
Right.
here.
I would anticipate it would be, we haven't picked a date for a
Yeah.
special meeting yet.
Right.
But anticipating that will be as far out in that window as
Okay,
possible, just to make sure that all this stuff can get done.
all right,
I would anticipate the need for a committee meeting a couple days ahead of
Sure.
that.
sure.
And maybe a second one sooner than that, if there are negotiation topics that I may want help on.
Sure. All right,
But at this time, I can't give you dates or suggestions.
that's fine. Actually, that gives me a good overview of what you're asking for. I understand now. Without digging through, who is the executive board? Who's on the executive board here?
I believe it is you, Melissa,
And me.
and Jeff.
Okay,
So, Chair, Vice Chair.
Are we allowed to meet remote on that?
Sure.
Okay. There's a
Yeah,
good
this
chance
is
I'm
not a-
traveling for work next week.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we're
this
going
is
to
not a-
Traverse City next week, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, this wouldn't be a quorum necessary sort of a meeting or anything. Sure. All right. Just let me know, and I actually, over these next few weeks, I'm gonna be extraordinarily available, I think.
Good, I'd like to hear that.
That's the end of that, wasn't it?
Maybe you shouldn't
That
have
was
said that.
short-lived.
Barry, should we, set a date where the full board will reconvene?
Well, we're talking
we
about it,
need-
that's
we
coming
need
up
to do
here.
that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that is definitely
yeah.
one of the steps that has to happen.
Because a whole lot of stuff depends on that.
So as far as other essential air service, alternate essential air service, so other than kind of those board level things, the things that will be transitioning are, more on Cape Air and Contour's side. Contour has to basically bring in ground handling equipment. Cape Air will need to remove theirs. Contour will need to hire staffing. At this point, Contour will be starting service by bringing in staff from other stations, because logistically, hiring, drug tests, background tests, training isn't going to happen in that window.
Mhm.
So they will not have the ability of using local staff to start day one, so they will need to bring in local staff. I've assisted Contour with contact information both ways of existing staff being able to reach out to them, existing maintenance being able to reach out to them. I don't know what their staffing level intends to be, but I do know on maintenance, they plan to have at least one full-time maintenance person based here. They would like to also have access to contract maintenance for additional help. It mirrors the current setup, although there's a lot of contract maintenance that gets done right now. So that process it's a very interesting process to go through, that switchover from September 30th to October 1st. Cape Air will operate their last flight here 5 p.m. departure. So between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next day, signs have to come down, computers have to move, all new stuff has to come in, new signs have to go up. It's a whole process. In fact, Andrew Bonney and I, the last transition, we were here until midnight. Andrew was helping me paint the wall. It was previously red, and Cape Air's colors did not work with red, so it became blue, and we were here late that night. I was actually talking to Andrew this morning. We both laughed at that event 4 years ago. So it's a whole, and it may or may not go smoothly, but Contour asked me, because when this was wrapping up, DOT reached out to them and basically said, what date can you start? And Contour reached out to me and said, I think we can start October 1st. And I said, there are pros and cons to it, but let's just get it done. Dragging it out, I think some things go smoother, but it increases the public doesn't know who to book on. There's just more uncertainty the longer that happens. So that is what came back out of those conversations. That, in a nutshell, is where we stand. And again, all these agreements are, activity for the board to be focused on, but there's going to be a ton of other things on my plate as we go through the next couple weeks.
I know it's a public meeting, so anyone can see this, but the employees here now, have they heard that there would be a transition training and all that sort of thing? Because there's bound to be a little bit of, gee, what about us, going on right now?
Unfortunately, the employees are the ones that have really been hit hardest by all of this because it's their job. Yeah. So there's just been this cloud hanging over them. Do I have a job after September 30th? Yeah. And, when there was no information, there was nothing to give them. Now at least there's a date. Now, that doesn't mean Contour is necessarily going to hire the same employees, doesn't necessarily mean the same employees want to work with Contour, different company, different culture. So, but that process can all start now. So in some ways, the cloud of not knowing is gone, but now it's the reality of going through a process, basically hiring for a new job for a new company. Sure. So Contour's schedule is posted. It's obviously 2 flights a day instead of 4. There's a morning departure at 8:40, which is like right between the current 2 departures. Currently it's around 8 and 9:10. So reaccommodating people on that flight would be fairly easy since it's within an hour of their original scheduled flight. That flight then comes back here at 12:45, or 12:15, sorry, which again is similar to the return flights in the morning on Cape Air. Mm-hmm. It then leaves at 1 p.m., which is earlier than Cape Air's afternoon departures, which are right now at 3 and 5. It means that for passengers that need to convert over, you're going to be getting there 2 to 4 hours earlier than you would have before. So, from reaccommodating people, you're going to have a longer layover, but you should be able to make everything. The flight coming back in the evening will be back at 6:30, which is basically the same time as the second to last Cape Air return flight. So that will be able to pick all those passengers. Where there might be an issue is the late return flight from Cape Air, which gets in at 9 right now. Connections may be a problem to reaccommodate on that. But overall, the schedule is very nice. It is fairly similar to what Cape Air has flown in the off-season when they only had 2 flights a day. So, I think it's good. In looking at the equipment assigned to these flights, I found it actually a little bit interesting. So we are starting, even though our agreement is for 12 flights a week year-round, the grant and the award is phrased such that we have flexibility to move those seasonally as we see fit. So in that sense, Contour will be starting with 2 flights a day, 7 days a week, so 14 a week. I haven't yet looked out into the future, although I've talked with them in the past, that will decrease in the heart of winter and then ramp back up to a full 14 a week in the summer next year. But of those, initially of those 14 flights a week, 12 of them are going to be operated with Embraer 135, which are a smaller, a little bit smaller aircraft. Is actually the exact same aircraft that Frontier operated when they were here. It'll be equipped with 30 seats because that is the limit of their operating capacity. And then 2 flights a week will be operated with the CRJ 200, which is a little bit larger aircraft. So we'll actually have a mix of different aircraft operating out of here. Contour had asked me about that, but seeing it actually in the schedule was really the first time I had confirmation on that. The Embraer 135 has a little bit better performance for shorter runways. So that is, I think, part of the reason that they are using that aircraft here going into winter. Any other questions? Again, there's a lot of stuff going on. I know one thing I should mention. So I mentioned that there are currently like 1,200 bookings on Cape Air / other carriers post December 30th that need to get transitioned. I don't yet have an answer as to how they will be transitioned. Cape Air and Contour discussed it a little bit on Friday when they had their initial transitioning conversation. Their relevant parties are meeting this afternoon to work out the details on that. So I don't have an answer, but I know that they're working on it.
Fees.
Don't know. I mean, my preference of what shouldn't happen is Cape Air just cancels everything, hands it over to Contour, and basically says you contact them and get them to rebook. That's not the right customer service way of handling it. But again, I don't know. Gets into in some cases, technical details of how their systems work, who the connection partner is. If it's American, it will be easier than United, et cetera, et cetera. Any other questions?
So to recap, we got an Embraer 135 for all flights except 2 per week, which are going to be CRJ 200s. We've got an 8:40 departure leaving Manistee, arrival 12:15 p.m., departure
at 1 p.m.
A departure at 1 p.m. out and arriving back at 6:30.
That is true every day of the week except Saturdays. The Saturday late return is either 5 p.m. or shortly after 5.
Do you know what the flight time is?
It is scheduled from departure to arrival at 1 hour and 10 minutes. And that's solely because it takes 30 minutes to taxi in Chicago. So, I mean,
Like 28 minutes flight.
Yeah. It's probably 30, but
36. Yeah.
36.
What time was that Saturday flight now currently?
I think it comes back at 5 p.m. So it's earlier that one day of the week.
Okay.
I know some people have already booked fares. An interesting story. So an hour after I got the announcement, I got an email from Cindy Fuller. I know that's not her current last name. And she said, trying to book, and I just saw online an announcement of, October service on Contour. It's like, only been published an hour. How did you run into that? And I responded to her saying, here's where the situation is in a couple days, and she emailed me this morning that she had booked on a new carrier, so.
And I saw on what you sent us, it also said United. So is it gonna be the similar, you'd be able to book on United, or is it strictly to American Coach?
Right now, it is strictly American.
Okay.
And that is one of the changes I have made to the website, is I've removed all United references that I could find. That is, Contour does not currently have an agreement, an interline agreement with United. In earlier conversations, that is something they're anticipating before the end of the year, so that should bring us back to that parity. And they're also anticipating their American interline being upgraded to a full American code share by the end of the year. But no commitments on those dates, but that's what their current feeling is. Any other questions?
Come down to now asking what would be the best timing from your standpoint for us to have a special meeting, to get all the things done that you have swirling in your head.
Looking at a calendar, I mean, the last day of the month, which would give the most time to get everything done, but also, if anything comes out of that that needs follow-up, would give us no time to follow up, would be the 30th, which is a Monday. The board typically meets on Monday. So that is an option. I think I would prefer something the end of the previous week.
Like the 26, 27, right in there, 25 maybe even. That's getting pretty.
Then I'm worried about, that's 10 days.
That's what I'm saying. I don't want to.
Contract.
That's what I said. I don't want to crowd you here.
Right.
So we're looking at maybe the 26th or the 27th.
That's.
Everybody take a look and see.
And again, my preference would be, as much time as possible, so the 27th.
27th.
My
Fridays.
preference would be the 27th.
But Fridays.
27th in the afternoon, I can do
I'm
something
okay.
after 1 o'clock.
Yeah, me too.
I'm okay. So you want to go?
Can we remote in? I know I'm in Washington DC that
I
day.
know I'm gonna be at a travel conference in Florida.
Do we have a quorum?
I will
If-
be able to hear.
1, 2,
I can
3,
be- I can be
4,
here.
5. We have a quorum, so yeah.
It's after 1, yeah.
Yeah. Can't vote, but you can
Yeah, so
you can complain.
We'll definitely allow you to come in, but yeah, you couldn't.
Yeah. So we're looking at, and you said after 1,
Yeah.
does that mean 1 o'clock or does that mean 2 o'clock?
Well, 1:30 is a solid go.
I'm good anytime after 1 o'clock, so 1:30 would be fine.
Is that okay with you? Okay, so the 27th.
So are we saying 1:30 then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Karen, does that work for you?
Yeah, you got all my PTO days.
That's all right, I got handed a bill as soon as I walked in the door today, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Then I'm gonna switch over.
Well, before we do that then, so the, executive committee,
Oh.
do you know right away of a time that you would like for the executive committee to meet with? Okay,
I don't.
fair enough,
I will reach out
fair
to
enough,
Yeah,
okay.
the three of you.
The ability to Zoom also is
Yeah,
very helpful.
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Okay, then I'm gonna move on to the marketing, program that was emailed out over the weekend. So last month, the board had requested, a presentation for Right Side Design. Brandon had intended to be here to present this, but he had to take his daughter to a doctor's appointment that came up on Friday, and this was the first time that could get her in. So he apologizes for not being here. When we talked about this at the last board meeting, part of the discussion was around current fiscal year budgeted marketing dollars that we're not spending this fiscal year because we didn't know who our air carrier was gonna be, so we've not really been doing a lot of marketing spend as we end the fiscal year. Obviously, we can ramp that up now, but still, 2 weeks does not give us a lot of time to spend wisely our dollars. So there was a conversation last month about having a proposal from Right Side Design such that we would essentially prepay out of this year's budget, but then have those dollars essentially get spent in the future. In a conversation I had last week with Lisa and Susan, that's not the way government accounting policies work.
Well, you can, but it's going to show up on your books as a liability.
It still basically hits next year's budget.
Yeah. So once you spend that, it's gonna come out of prepaid, and then it's gonna hit your expense line item.
So with that information, Brandon and I met last Thursday and basically said, we're not going to ask for approval of a plan that would be half-baked at this point. We're just, Right Side Design, working with me, will just go through and come up with a plan that wisely, or at least as wisely as possible, spends what we have allocated for next year, what we anticipate from Contour. Now, there needs to be agreement with Contour that we can jointly spend their money. And then the quote-unquote carryover, which really is a budget adjustment next year that will basically say we're going to increase our marketing spend by this carryover amount and take it from fund balance that we saved this year. Am I saying that correctly, Susan? Okay. So this then is the marketing program as put together by Brandon on Friday and I think sent to me late Friday or Saturday. So this is then the breakdown of that amount of dollars to be budgeted. So we have allocated in our fiscal year 25 budget $20,000. We anticipate having about $12,000 in carryover to be reallocated next year. And then Contour's proposal includes $25,000 in annual marketing spend. So you add those together, we've got $57,000 of marketing dollars to spend.
So the money that they're going to put in, Contour, right?
Yes.
So are they going to send you a check for that?
Don't know. That is part of the contract we
Because
need.
if that's what it is, then you'll have to add it into your budget that you haven't approved yet. You have to include that as, revenue and then include it in your expense line item. Because that's how it was the last time.
That is how it was last time.
I would bill them for quarterly. Let's say if they said, oh, you're gonna do $10,000, I'd bill them quarterly, $2,500 every quarter, and they would reimburse that back.
Right.
So
that's
the other thing to keep in mind when you.
Yes, that is one of the items in our contract with Contour is how we will jointly market.
Right. Okay.
So here are the first version of how these dollars could be spent. So there's basically some management and time on Right Side Design's part. We generally have 2 meetings a month to go through this between myself and them, as well as when you, as a board, want him to come in to present to the full board. The majority of the dollars go into digital marketing. It is the platform that lets us gather some statistics as to effectiveness. We can measure the marketing much more effectively in a digital form. So that includes the website, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Google search and display ads, video, which would be YouTube, video shorts, and then our traditional email marketing program. Some print and promotional assets. As you go through the terminal, anything that says Cape Air needs to get replaced with things that say Contour, and for the most part, those are our spend on that out of marketing budget. Promotional activities, to be determined what those might be, but we've done a lot of different things in the past, and looking at bringing back some of those things. Joint promotion and partnerships, again, in the past, we've attempted to do partnerships with Crystal Mountain, the casino, et cetera. Now may be the time to do some of those again, given the nature of the Contour service. And then, as was mentioned in this presentation later, some banners around the airport, and since the airport now owns a new hangar that is strategically placed in two sides to capture eyeballs on 31, proposing to put banners on that hangar that we have not done in the past, especially because the banner or billboard essentially that we've had on the end of the one hangar is now mostly not visible with the new hangar that got built there. This proposal still does include some billboards, although far fewer than were anticipated in the proposal presented last month. Brandon thinks with Cape Air being very consistent with having billboards in our community, that people are now kind of expecting to see that, so changing that over with the new carrier, at least for a period of 3 to 6 months, which this $5,000 would cover, kind of gives that transition that it's not Cape Air anymore, but I'm seeing at the same place. Right. It used to say Cape Air, now it says Contour. Right. Oh, that means kind of some transition. And then, $1,000 that pops up on things. We've got new brochures to reprint because they all describe Cape Air, et cetera. That was under print promotional. Here are some examples of what things could look like. So some social media, highly featuring the fact that it's a jet in a larger aircraft is part of that goal, especially initially as we're transitioning, because that, from a other perspective, the customer sees, oh, you're still going to Chicago, it's a schedule that is similar, connect with American, so a lot of what the customer sees pre-arriving at the airport will be a similar experience. It's the fact that it's a jet versus the 9-seat prop plane, that is kind of the initial difference. So that is kind of the initial focus of some of these early advertising.
In looking at my notes, Barry, back from that prior slide.
Yes.
Was it 20 or 25,000? I thought we decided not to reduce it to 20 and maintain.
No, it's 20. 20 is what we've been spending. We were going to reduce it to 10.
Okay. Never been 25?
I won't say never, but not in
recent history?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, this is an updated version of our brochure. Right now, what's out there is green top, moving over to blue, similar style, but again, re-updated. Essential, what a billboard like. I don't particularly like this billboard, and I want to work with Brandon on it. There's too much going on, too many words. Needs to be a little simpler, but tweak that. here's what I was talking about with the location of that hangar and mock-up of what it would be, although not sure this image is completely correct because in Google Street View, that this was done before the other hangar was there, so I think you're at some point you get around the other hangar and you start seeing it, so. Go ahead, Adam. You want to say something?
Yeah, I do.
I got a frog in my throat.
Yeah.
Would that be lit?
With added dollars, yes.
You know,
I mean, there is power there, obviously.
there's
but it is-
an optimal distance from the road for marketing. And I would question whether we're within the optimal distance or whether we're spending $5,000 way outside the roadway.
Well, this is not $5,000, this is probably $500 between the two. Because it's just printing these on vinyl banners. That $5,000 was more than just.
My misunderstanding.
Would the fence line be too close?
We've found that the one that is out there right now has been effective over the years, and again, it's not a huge cost, but it became less effective when a hangar was built to block it. So we have this real estate, and the way billboards work, you just can't go put up a billboard any place you want because the state now regulates those very strongly. So instead of spending $700 a month for one billboard on with Lamar or Wolverine, you can spend less than that and have permanent. So even though it
For both those things.
I think the print cost of the vinyl is around that. Don't quote me on an exact number, but
I think it's a perfect place though, because that it's just the fortuitous tilt of that building,
right,
where you
the
can see
orientation
it from
of the
both
building
sides.
works for both directions.
Yeah.
You know, is it 100% the best? No, because as Adam is saying, it should be closer to the highway to be as effective as possible, which it isn't. But it's inexpensive and it's a long-term, put it up there once and it should last for years.
Well, it's also hey, here's what's going on right here at this airport that you're looking at right now. I think there are a lot of things good with this.
Then, so we traditionally target our marketing in two regions, northern Michigan and Chicago, because with a $50,000 rough budget, you can't go nationwide with that amount of dollars. So we target our region, which, you know, with a message that basically says you can use us as an alternative or as your preferred choice regionally to access anywhere in the world. And from a Chicago region, you know, spend your dollars up in northern Michigan, and we're a perfect gateway airport for you to do whatever you want to do up here. Roughly, those are what we're trying to do. And again, that is similar to what we've done in the past on that from a targeting. We have in the past dabbled in, let's spend, you know, $5 a day in Denver for, you know, a month. But the way digital is moving, that is becoming much, much less effective because you can't target people as effectively as you used to. Privacy laws just get in the way of you targeting people. So, you know, we're adjusting to that. So, just going through the summary here, just see. I mentioned that. Oh, right. So something I'll mention here, but I should have mentioned earlier. So initially, Contour's pricing starts at $49 each way. So that is less than Cape Air has charged. Cape Air has had promotions that were $49. So when they initially started, it was $49, and I think they've done one or two sales in the time they've been here that have been $49, but their normal rate starts at $59 or $69 season. So Contour is coming in with good pricing, and I'll actually touch on that a little bit more when I get to my actual report when we look at airfare pricing. Okay, so mention that, and then one other thing that is going on that, so the Manistee Tourism Authority has plans in place of installing kiosks here at the airport. So if anyone's ever stopped into their main kiosk downtown on the corner of River and Maple, in the West Shore building, they have basically a much larger version of this. They are strategically placing this type of content in all hotels in the area and in other high visitor-centric locations like the airport, basically giving people who come here information about what there is to do from a visitor's perspective, a tourism perspective in our community. So plans of this has two actually in here in the airport, one on the general aviation side and then another one of these on the commercial side, which will replace kind of the card rack that we have sitting out front right now with something much more professional. So this is also coming, and the Tourism Authority is paying for all of that. Any questions on kind of the marketing set of issues as we transition?
Are you expecting a vote on that, or are you coming back for further discussion?
Generally, there isn't a vote on that. This is more informational, but there's feedback you'd like that we'll definitely take it back to Brandon and we'll incorporate it. And you don't have to answer now, you can talk to me later.
Sounds good, thanks.
Is that gonna be just a general article?
That's another good point that I forgot to mention earlier. So,
How about TV?
well,
That was on my list to bring up at some point.
Mm-hmm. We have a little
The-
card for the first light.
the answer to that is no. There is so much that can go wrong that first flight. Having cameras and other people here when you don't even know if the computers are gonna be able to connect to the internet to check people in. We don't.
Let's make a great report.
Down the road.
So, what I've talked to Brandon on marketing and Contour with, is that we'd like to do a ribbon cutting shortly after we initially start.
Yeah.
So, we were looking at October 23rd or 24th. So Brandon felt wanted to be kind of midweek, because when you get towards Friday, if you miss a TV deadline, they go dark for the weekend, and it's not relevant content for the next week. So Wednesday or Thursday were Brandon's recommendations. Does the board have any preference on either of those days?
24th.
And if we're doing a ribbon cutting, all of you would be invited, and it would be nice if a number of board members could attend that. Given our previous conversation,
I'll be hunting in South Dakota, so it'll be pretty fun.
Blind? I'll make it good.
Driving with a couple dogs and a
load of guns.
I was gonna say, I could get you a good deal on it.
As long as, I mean, no one has any other comments, I'll try to make that the 24th, in which case we will send out invites to press and try to get, something here, and,
Yeah.
I believe Matt, Chaffetz will be able to be here, although I haven't confirmed a date with him yet, but he wouldn't be able to be here for the first. He's already got a commitment at another EAS airport, that's
would you
also
do-
starting service on the first.
Would it be morning or afternoon?
Yeah, that's,
I don't know, do you have a preference?
Morning's better for TV, if you're
Afternoon.
trying to get it on TV.
Right, I mean,
I think the objective is to get it on
Get some TV
TV in
coverage.
northern Michigan.
so how about in between, midday, like noon? Okay. So, I got a lot of parties that need to sign off on that, but that's what I'll try to, position. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay.
You just make sure he invites 7 and 4 and 9 and 10.
Oh, yeah, no, they definitely, yes,
Mhm.
good.
But there'll be no article coming out within the next couple of weeks about the
I don't know,
October one?
haven't yet thought about that.
well,
detail.
we can submit that ourselves,
Yeah,
though.
that's
We don't
what I
have to
was
wait for
thinking.
them.
Correct. No,
We can
I-
make sure everything is okey-dokey, get a picture of a smiling person getting on board the
Right,
plane, and...
Right.
Okay.
I would expect, since the News Advocate watches these recordings and decides to write stories from that we will get coverage based on that. I would hope they would reach out to me for comments on this particular topic. But if I don't hear from them in the next couple days, once this is posted, I will reach out to them, because there
Yeah.
should be an initial,
Yeah.
this is happening, and then other ribbon cutting and or first day of service type coverage.
Whether you reach out or Brandon reaches out, you know, maybe there should be a coordinated statement, and Matt Chaffetz, we could get a quote from him on file. We've got the CEO of the new airline
Yeah.
saying, I'm excited to be in Manistee, and
We'll definitely have those pieces for the 24th.
no, I know.
Whether or not I get those together before the News Advocate,
I'm
I
sure
don't
you'll be
know.
busy negotiating the contract. I guess my comment is more directed to Karen. I think that at least, I would think having a well-rounded, thought-out, statement by our new air carrier and whoever the powers that be are, maybe we even want to reach out to elected officials or whoever that helped
We
in this.
typically put together a press release that would announce the ribbon cutting, and that is kind of our into 9 and 10, 7 and 4, and other media outlets.
Yeah.
That has all of that kind of cut and paste type commentary as well.
My sense is if we don't highlight the points we want highlighted, the News Advocate may not get the full story.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right, Adam.
We can tell the story we want if we are more involved in the creation of it. And so I think if we delayed a week or two and got the right story out, might be more advantageous than having the News Advocate write half the story for us.
Yeah, just so it's out, you know, first part of October, because
Right.
that's a major
Yeah,
changeover, and,
Yeah.
you know, this is really an advantage for our county. You know, it's like,
Mhm.
it is,
Yeah.
it is part of our continued growth, and, you know, and we're embracing this with much excitement, so
Mhm.
we wanna kinda let everybody in the community know that this transition is happening.
Well, my experience sending articles in, you know, from the school, they pretty much printed it word for word exactly as I handed it to them, and used the photograph that I gave them, so.
Yeah, the less they have to do though.
Yeah, the key is to get them good photos.
Mhm.
That's what's important. I'm gonna then move on to my actual report,
All right.
if you don't mind.
I don't mind that at all.
So I'm gonna first start off with, and I know I updated the board, when this happened, but we did have a crash of an ultralight, aircraft here on August 22nd, 11:04 a.m. And if you're not familiar with an ultralight, it's open, almost like a kite with wheels. I mean, it's aluminum frame. I mean, it's a very lightweight, small aircraft. They aren't licensed in the same way. They pilot, you don't need a pilot license in the same way to fly them. So they're a very different type of aircraft. And traditionally, they're not even flown at airports. You usually fly them in hayfields and away from other traffic. A gentleman who just had purchased this ultralight has received flight instruction here in the past and is passionate about aviation, and this is the path he decided he wanted to take. And his first flight ended in that crash. He was taken to Traverse City for medical evaluation. I honestly never heard anything after that. It was a test of our emergency response. We had EMS, fire, and sheriff all respond, and we've learned a few things. I mean, we do emergency tests, but the real thing, it's different. And there's a couple things that we've learned, and we're going to have a post-incident review in October. We actually have an annual review of our emergency plan each year in October, and this will be really good topics to talk about in that review. Little things like when the sheriff and the fire department responded, they didn't have their lights on as they're driving down the runway. They had them running when they're going down the highway, but as soon as they got onto the airport, they weren't. And it's just like, no, for the same reasons you want those on. So it just, little things, but you would never, in a practice scenario, you don't think about things like that. So just little things that this is fortunate that there was no significant injuries, and it ultimately will be a good test for us to learn from. So normally I don't have anything to report. I do this. Our billboard lease agreements, Lamar has requested a meeting. They apparently don't like the fact that I sent them a new contract. Rainbow Bend, just MIA. I mean, we sent them a contract. We were in communication. They were going to put a check in the mail that day, and then nothing. So
We have a new billboard to use.
Yep, that's what it sounds like.
So that's very interesting scenario. But the people that we're talking to for the contract are different than the people that are making the payment. So it's a confusing situation. Our 139, I should be handing out things. So our airport inspection results came out between our last meeting and this one. And I'm passing those around for you to review. Just one minor discrepancy that came out that is already addressed. I need to file the paperwork on it. So there you see that. And then the last thing is, and I think this is just coincidence, but on Thursday, the new manager of Enterprise and Cadillac stopped in, and I now have a meeting scheduled next Monday with her and her regional director. I think they were just looking to expand, and the timing of this could potentially be perfect. So.
And they have our fleet at the county, and we may be looking at a fleet too, so we're a market area for them.
So I'm, again, it came out of the blue, but I think the timing could be perfect.
We're gonna
to work, I have to drive my personal car, because there's nowhere around here that I can get reimbursed.
So, still negotiating on our door card reader situation that I updated the board on last month. Our TSA's lease expires the end of this month, and the TSA General Services Administration manages that lease. They want to do a new lease, they want to come up and visit, and that hasn't yet happened. So I reached out again to them last week saying, this is coming up. I have not yet heard back from them. And then a reminder that my contract and the Orchard Beach contracts expire the end of this month as well. It's traditional that we go month to month afterwards until and given everything else that's happening, I'm not expecting that the board will be finalizing these within the next 2 weeks, so, but it is out there. Switch back to this other window.
For how long do you want, Gary, or when would you like to renew it?
That's a good question, and lots of different answers to that question.
It's gone incredibly long in the
It is
past.
sometimes
Last year, we got it closer to on time. In fact, I think we
Last year was
were
on
on time.
It has gone as much as 6 months before, and then there was an arrears adjustment to bring things up, which is kind of awkward. So I would anticipate before the end of the year. But in some ways, this dovetails with the transition committee's conversations about what should the length of these contracts be and all of those things, which I don't think there will be answers in that time frame. So I guess I'm anticipating it'll be a year contract, and therefore you don't get too far into the year for just a year contract. So soonish.
Yeah.
But there's no pressure from my perspective, any particular date. So on the, I guess I'm doing it in the wrong order. What do I have first in my written stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one. So total passengers last month. So Cape Air did not quite hit what they did in July. If you remember, July was their Cape Air's best month and our best month other than Frontier months. So that was, very good. Fell a little bit short in August, but still it was Cape Air's best August and their Cape Air's second best month overall. So we are significantly ahead of where we were last year, and that's what this bottom number is. So last year through August, we were at 7,100 total passengers, and this year we're at 8,200. So that's 14% or 15% increase. So doing well there. Reliability, Cape Air, 6% canceled flights, 8% delayed, overall on time 86%, which is roughly where they've been at during the course of this year.
Okay, so should I read that we've achieved the 8,000 enplanements?
This is total passengers, so if I think the numbers down below are what I tried to calculate as where we are year to date for enplanement. So I think that 3,600 versus 4,100 is the enplanement. So no, we are not at 8,000 enplanements. And again, as I mentioned to the board last week, by including, and I did a little research this past month on ways that the sightseeing flights could be included, and I think there is a path forward for that, which gives us about 1,300 enplanements. So depending on how Contour does, it's 8,000 this year is attainable. But we need a smooth transition, and this 1,100 bookings, we can't lose half of them and make that happen. Then we go to airfare.
Is there anything that we can do to, you know, when you look at the upside is $600,000, I think, if we hit 8,000 enplanements, right?
Yep.
So it seems that it's really in our financial interest to get 600. Is there anything that we can do to ensure that we don't lose the bookings?
I don't know, because I don't know what their plan is, and until they meet, the airlines meet this afternoon, I hear and can react and navigate them in that process. I don't have an answer. Obviously, there are things we can do, but they may be doing the right thing already, in which case there's nothing additional we need. But this is one of the many reasons it is important that that process happen well from a customer service perspective, not just, oh, yep, we met the legal requirement, which is, yep, we're just legally required to refund your money, which is good enough from a customer service perspective. Here on the airfare side, this morning, we now have Contour fares loaded and available on American. We gathered current data. Now, naturally, this isn't apples to apples, since the other fares were middle last week, and the Contour column is this morning, so and fares change all the time, so can't say it's apples to apples. But the first column is as of last week, I think it was Wednesday, what Cape Air's fares and American through Cape Air were. The last column here is what Contour through American is this morning. And it's roughly the same. I mean, there's some higher, some lower. The average is $12 difference. So it's roughly the same fares, which I find encouraging, because Contour doesn't have a code share. And without a code share, you generally will have a little bit higher airfares than with a code share. So seeing those numbers, I was very happy that we're still in the ballpark. We're less than Muskegon, currently more than Traverse City, but Traverse City has some extra capacity as they wind down their summer season, and they've got a lot of flights and not as much demand up there, so that drives fares down there. Grand Rapids is still by far the least expensive. But this month, again, you know, looking at adding in some parking, because our free parking is this huge benefit that we can't, hard sometimes to communicate, because people just look at fare and they don't consider other costs, but parking rates at Grand Rapids are the most expensive, so that offsets their advantage, and that levels the playing field significantly, as it usually does. So, initial snapshot with Contour fares looks very similar to what we've been seeing, so I'm happy with that. I'm always concerned that something won't work out as well, and that is a significant factor in driving acceptance of people using our airport, is what that fare is. Really very little to update on other things. So ALP update, again, that is, it's like been over 2 years that this has been in their queue and still no feedback. Our major project, I got a little bit of update that we are definitely in the FAA discretionary funding process. They've asked for additional information from me that I need to get them today on that. So there's movement, but again, that's a next spring project at this point. Same thing for here, no updates. There is our fall conference for airport will fall over Contour's first day of service, October 1st, so I don't know if I'm even gonna be able to get there, but some of these things get talked about, announced, at that conference. And then, you know, my last Cape Air Air Service update, August was good, mentioned that. As we were going through the spring and talking about load factors, I mentioned this last month, but Cape Air, 80% is really all Cape Air can do. 2 months in a row now, they've been over 80%, which means we are leaving capacity at the gate because the flights, entire days worth of flights are sold out weeks in advance. It's really interesting once we get through this transition, how this additional capacity will be received by our market, especially in the summer. September, you're not going to see a record-breaking September. Currently, we're behind about 2% from last year. It's just, there's been so much uncertainty post the end of this month that it has impacted us for the rest of the year. Now, can that be offset with the positives that are becoming with the jet service? We will see. That's all I have. And sorry I talked so long.
Oh, a lot to talk about. All right, anything from anyone? Any follow-ups, questions? All right, do we have anyone on for public comment?
Nope.
Online? All right, just generally, comments from the authority members? Anything to end with? I think we got all the dates in for the ribbon cutting for the special meeting. The executive committee will be TBA. I think that's all I can come up with. I was kind of putting everything in a logical list a minute ago. And all right, hearing nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Thank y'all for being here.